The rain didn't fall that night. It attacked. It slammed into the streets like it had something to prove, turning familiar roads into rushing rivers and quiet neighborhoods into places of fear. Street lights flickered, reflections trembling on the rising water, and somewhere in the chaos, a sound cut through everything else. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't a siren. It was a cry, sharp, broken, and desperate. A dog's cry echoed to the flooded streets, bouncing off buildings, slipping to the rain, refusing to be ignored. At first, most people thought it was just another noise swallowed by the storm. In floods like this, sounds blend together, water rushing, metal groaning, distant shouts. But this cry was different. It rose and fell with panic, carrying something raw and urgent, as if the storm itself had a heartbeat and it was breaking. Anyone who heard it felt it in their chest, even if they couldn't explain why. In a small rescue van parked near the edge of the flooded block, Sarah gripped her radio tighter. She had been working emergency calls for hours, soaked to skin, exhausted beyond words. She had seen flooded homes, stranded families, cars half submerged and abandoned. She thought she was prepared for anything that night. Then she heard the sound. Her head snapped toward the dark street, eyes narrowing as the cry came again, louder this time, closer. "There," she said quietly, almost to herself. Beside her, Bilal, a volunteer who had joined the rescue team just weeks earlier, leaned forward, listening. The rain hammered against the van's roof, but even through the noise, the sound was clear now. Fear, pain, pleading. It wasn't just a dog barking. It was a dog calling for help. They stepped out into knee-deep water, flashlights cutting weak paths through the rain. Every step was uncertain, the ground hidden beneath swirling mud and debris. The flooded street looked endless, houses standing like silent witnesses as water crept higher along their walls. Somewhere ahead, the cry came again, sharper now, followed by a sudden silence that felt even worse. Sarah's heart raced. In rescue work, silence after panic is never a good sign. They followed the sound past a tilted car, its alarm long dead, past floating trash and broken branches. The water pulled at their legs, cold and relentless. Then they saw it. A storm drain near the corner, water rushing into it with terrifying force. And from that darkness, the cry erupted once more. The dog was trapped. At first, they could only see flashes, wet fur, frantic movement, eyes reflecting the flashlight for a split second before vanishing again. The drain was partially collapsed, its opening narrowed by debris. Water surged around it, dragging everything toward the black hole beneath the street. The dog was wedged just inside, its body trembling, paws scraping uselessly against slick concrete. "It's being pulled under," Bilal said, his voice tight. The dog cried again, a sound so full of fear that it seemed impossible for such a small body to hold it. Every time the water surged, it dragged the dog deeper, stealing inches, stealing time. Sarah dropped to her knees in the water, without thinking, bracing herself against the curb. "It's okay," she said, her voice shaking but loud enough to carry. "I'm here. Don't give up." She didn't know if the dog could understand her words, but somehow the frantic movement slowed. The dog's eyes locked onto hers, wide, desperate, trusting in a way that hurt to see. That look alone carried 1,000 untold stories. How long had it been trapped there? How long had it been crying into the storm, hoping someone would hear? The rain intensified, as if the sky itself was testing their resolve. Water levels crept higher, spilling onto sidewalks, swallowing steps. Over the radio, voices crackled with warnings, more flooding expected. Streets becoming unsafe, rescue teams advised to pull back. Sarah barely heard them. All she could see was a dog, shaking, slipping, fighting to stay alive. Horace arrived moments later, another rescuer, carrying a rope and a metal hook. He took one look at the drain and swore under his breath. The current was stronger than it looked, and the structure unstable. One wrong move, and the drain could collapse further. Or someone could be pulled in. "We don't have much time," he said. The dog let out another cry, weaker now, almost hoarse. The sound had changed. It wasn't just fear anymore, it was exhaustion, the kind that comes when hope is running out. Sarah reached forward, stretching her arm into the rushing water. The cold burned her skin, numbing her fingers almost instantly. She felt around blindly, her heart pounding louder than the rain. Her fingertips brushed wet fur for a split second before the current yanked the dog back again. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Around them, the flooded street felt unreal, like the world had narrowed down to the single moment. A human hand and a terrified animal separated by inches and fate. Bilal held on to Sarah's jacket from behind, anchoring her, while Horace secured a rope to a nearby pole. Every person knew the risk. Every person stayed anyway. The dog's eyes never left Sarah. Even as water surged around its small body, even as fear took over, there was something else there, a quiet plea, a belief that someone would not let go. That trust pressed heavily on everyone's chest. The rain showed no mercy. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. The water roared louder, angrier, as if warning them to back away. Sarah took a breath and reached again, deeper this time, ignoring the cold, ignoring the pain. Her fingers closed around something, a scruff of fur, slick and shaking. "I've got you," she said, though her voice broke on the words. The dog cried out, startled, hope flaring and fear colliding all at once. The current surged violently, pulling back with sudden force, and Sarah felt her grip slipping. Bilal shouted her name. Horace tightened the rope. For one terrifying second, it felt like the storm was winning. And just as Sarah tightened her grip and the dog let out one final, desperate cry, something shifted beneath the water. Something none of them were prepared for. Something hidden in the darkness of the drain that would change everything about this rescue. The water surged again. The flashlight beam flickered, and the screen fades before anyone can see what happens next. The flashlight beam steadied again, but what it revealed only deepened the unease. The water near the drain wasn't just rushing anymore. It was swirling, as if something underneath was shifting its weight. Sarah's arm was still stretched forward, muscles burning. Her fingers locked in the dog's wet fur. She could feel how light the body was, how weak the trembling had become. Whatever had moved below the surface hadn't let go. "Something's down there," Horace said quietly, his voice nearly lost in the rain. The words hung in the air. Flooded streets hide many things. Broken pipes, debris, collapsed concrete. But the way the water pulled felt deliberate, heavy. Bilal tightened his grip on Sarah's jacket, his knuckles white. None of them said what they were all thinking. They didn't need to. The dog whimpered, a low, exhausted sound that barely escaped its throat. Its eyes fluttered, blinking against the rain and light, still locked on Sarah, as if she was the only solid thing left in the world. She swallowed hard and adjusted her stance, bracing one knee against the curb to keep from sliding closer to the drain. "It's okay," she murmured again, though she wasn't sure who she was trying to comfort, the dog or herself. As she held on, memories crept in uninvited. Sarah had grown up in this city, had walked these same streets as a child, never imagining they could become rivers overnight. She remembered her first rescue years ago, a cat trapped in a collapsed shed after heavy rains. She remembered the feeling afterward, the shaking hands, the quiet drive home, the weight that never fully leaves you. Rescue work wasn't about hero moments. It was about standing in fear and choosing not to step away. Behind them, the radio crackled again. More warnings, more flooded zones. Someone mentioned a rising water level upstream. The storm wasn't slowing. If anything, it was getting worse. Horace scanned the drain opening, sweeping his flashlight along the edges. The concrete was cracked, jagged, and slick with moss and grime. Something metallic glinted briefly before vanishing under the water again. A piece of bent rebar, or something else entirely. "We can't pull too hard," he said. "If whatever's under there shifts, it could collapse more the drain." Sarah nodded, though her focus never left the dog. She could feel its heart racing through her fingertips. Each surge of water made her grip weaken just a little more. The cold had numbed her hand, turning pain into something distant and dangerous. The dog suddenly stopped struggling. For a split second, the world seemed to pause. No thrashing, no desperate kicks, just stillness. "Hey!" Sarah said sharply, leaning closer despite the risk. "Stay with me. Don't you dare give up." The dog's chest rose faintly. Its eyes closed for a moment, then opened again, glassy and tired. That tiny movement felt heavier than any current. Bilal cursed under his breath and leaned forward, trying to get a better angle. "Maybe it's been here for hours," he said. "Maybe longer." That thought settled deep. Floodwaters had started rising late in the afternoon. If the dog had been swept in early, it could have been fighting for its life long before anyone heard its cries, long before help arrived. Sarah adjusted her grip again and felt something else under her fingers. A rough strap, slick with mud. A collar, old and worn. No tag, at least none she could feel. That meant someone, somewhere, might be searching for this dog even now. Unaware it was trapped beneath the street, calling into the storm. Another surge slammed into her arm, stronger than before. The rope around her waist tightened as Horace took more of her weight. The water climbed higher, creeping toward her chest. The drain groaned softly, a low, unsettling sound that sent a chill through everyone. "Listen," Horace said, his eyes fixed on the opening. "That's not just water." The sound came again, a dull scraping from deep inside the drain, followed by a shift in the current. The dog whimpered, reacting before any of them fully understood what was happening. Whatever was down there was moving again, closer this time. Sarah's heart pounded. She imagined the narrow tunnels beneath the streets, dark and endless, filled with debris dragged in by the flood. She imagined how small the dog must have felt, pressed against concrete, fighting a force it couldn't see. A sudden shout echoed from farther down the street. Another rescue team was approaching, their lights bouncing through the rain. Relief flickered briefly, but it didn't ease attention. More people didn't mean less danger. It meant more voices, more movement, more weight on an already unstable street. As they drew closer, one of the newcomers slipped, catching himself just before falling into the water. The current was growing faster by the minute. Time was slipping away. Sarah took a slow breath and shifted her position, trying to lift the dog even an inch higher. The effort sent a sharp pain through her shoulder, but she didn't react. The dog cried out again, louder now, the sound tearing through the rain like a warning. Then Sarah felt it. A tug that didn't come from the water. It was brief, almost gentle, but unmistakable. Something below had brushed against her arm. Not debris drifting past. Not a sudden surge. Something solid, moving with purpose. She froze. "Horace," she said quietly, forcing calm into her voice. "I felt something." Bilal stiffened behind her. The others fell silent, the rain suddenly sounding too loud, too close. The flashlight beam dipped, catching ripples that moved against the flow of the water. No one spoke for a moment. Fear has a way of filling silence, of painting pictures you wish you couldn't see. Flooded drains have swallowed many things over the years, most of them harmless, some of them not. The dog began to struggle again, panic reigniting as the water surged. Its claws scraped against concrete, slipping, failing. Sarah tightened her grip instinctively, even as her arm trembled. "I'm not letting go," she whispered, more like a promise than a statement. The rope strained. The drain creaked louder. The storm showed no sign of mercy. And beneath the surface, whatever had shifted before moved again, unseen, pulling at the water, pulling at the moment. The mystery deepened, the danger closing in, and the dog's cries rose once more into the flooded streets, as if calling not just for rescue, but for someone to understand what was really happening beneath them. The new rescue team slowed as they reached the scene, sensing the tension before anyone spoke. Their lights swept over the flooded street, the half-submerged cars. The rescuers braced against the current. One of them, an older man named Cameron, had been working flood responses for decades. He took one look at the drain and shook his head slightly, not in fear, but in recognition. "These old systems," he said quietly, "they were never built for this much water." Sarah barely heard him. Her world had narrowed to the weight in her hand, the dog's uneven breathing, the strange pull beneath the surface. Every few seconds, the current changed direction just enough to feel wrong. The dog whimpered again, its body pressing closer to the edge of the drain, as if trying to escape something it could sense but not see. Bilal shifted behind her, his voice low. "Sarah," your hands shaking. She knew. The cold had crept past numbness into weakness. She tried switching her grip slightly, just enough to get better leverage, but the dog flinched at the movement, panic flaring. She froze again, whispering soft words she hoped would cut through the storm. Across the street, a woman stood on a doorstep, soaked and shaking, clutching a blanket around her shoulders. She had been watching in silence, eyes wide, hands pressed to her mouth. When the dog cried out again, she gasped softly, as if the sound had reached something deep inside her. "I heard that dog an hour ago," she called out suddenly, her voice trembling. "I thought it was just noise. I didn't know." Her words carried guilt, not accusation. Sarah felt a tight ache in her chest. In disasters, everyone carries some version of that thought. If only I'd known. If only I'd acted sooner. Horace crouched closer to the drain, careful with each step. He lowered his flashlight deeper, angling it against the rushing water. For a moment, the beam caught something pale beneath the surface. Not clear enough to identify, but enough to confirm it wasn't just shadow. "There's more debris down there than we thought," he said. "Could be blocking an outlet. That would explain the pull. Or it could explain something else." No one said out loud. The radio crackled again, this time with urgency. Another street nearby had flooded completely. A vehicle had stalled. People were trapped. Resources were stretched thin, decisions stacking on top of each other with no easy answers. Cameron stepped closer, scanning Sarah's posture, the strain in her shoulders. "We may have to change approach," he said carefully. "If that drain collapses." "I know," Sarah said, sharper than she intended. She took a breath and softened her tone. "I know the risk." But risk was an abstract word until you were holding it in your hands, until you felt a living thing depending on you not to slip, not to panic, not to choose wrong. The dog suddenly barked once, short and hoarse, then cried again, louder than before. The sound echoed between buildings, carrying down side streets, through rain-filled alleys. Somewhere nearby, another door opened. A man stepped out with his phone raised, recording despite the storm. His face was pale, eyes fixed on the scene. "Please," the woman on the steps whispered, as if anyone could hear her over the rain. The water surged again, stronger, and this time Sarah felt the tug clearly, not on her arm, but on the dog itself. The body shifted in her grip, pulled sideways toward the darkness. She tightened her hold instinctively, pain flaring through her shoulder. "It's pulling again," Bilal shouted. Horace grabbed the rope, planting his feet. Cameron reached out, bracing against a street sign. For a moment, everyone moved as one, reacting without thinking, driven by the same instinct to hold the line. Sarah leaned back, using her weight to counter the pull. Her boot slid slightly on the submerged pavement, heart leaping into her throat. The dog's claws scraped helplessly, water splashing high enough to soak her face. "Stay with me," she said through clenched teeth. "Please." The dog's eyes met hers again, wide and shining, and something in that look shifted. Not fear, not panic. Trust. It stopped fighting for just a second, its body going still, as if it had decided to place everything it had left into that single connection. That trust terrified her more than the storm. Behind them, Cameron spoke into his radio, requesting additional equipment, barriers, supports, anything to stabilize the area. The response was delayed, voices overlapping, confusion heavy in the air. The storm had pushed the system to its limits. The man recording lowered his phone, his voice breaking as he spoke to no one in particular. "It's just a dog," he said, then shook his head. "But listen to it. Listen." No one corrected him. In moments like this, labels don't matter. Life is life. Fear sounds the same no matter who feels it. Sarah's arm burned now, muscles trembling with every second. She wondered how much longer she could hold on. She wondered how much longer the dog could. Beneath the water, the unseen force shifted again, and the drain let out another low groan, deeper this time. Horace looked up at her, rain streaming down his face. "If this gets worse." "I know," she said again, her voice barely above the storm. But knowing didn't make the choice any easier. The dog let out another cry, weaker now, and pressed his head against the edge of the drain, as if trying to climb toward her. Sarah leaned closer, ignoring the danger, her free hand reaching instinctively, even though she knew it wouldn't help. In that moment, the flooded street seemed to hold its breath. The rain kept falling. The water kept rising. And beneath them, the mystery remained, pulling, waiting, threatening to tip the balance at any second. The rescue was far from over, and whatever was hidden below the surface was not done making itself known. The rain grew heavier, not louder, but heavier, as if every drop carried weight. It pressed down on the flooded street, on the bowed heads of the rescuers, on the moment itself. Sarah could feel time stretching, each second pulling thin as her arm trembled, and the dog's breathing became more uneven. The storm had turned this corner of the city into a closed world, cut off from everything else. Cameron moved carefully along the curb, testing the ground with his boot before each step. "Water's rising faster now," he said, eyes scanning the street. "If it reaches that mark, we'll lose footing." No one answered. They all saw it. The faint line on the wall of the nearest house, already disappearing inch by inch. The dog shifted again, a weak attempt to lift itself. Its body felt lighter in Sarah's grip than it had moments ago, and that scared her more than the pull beneath the water. She adjusted her hold, cradling the dog's chest as best she could without letting go. Its fur was matted with mud, its sides shaking with every breath. Behind them, more people had gathered, neighbors who hadn't evacuated, drawn by the cries and the flashing lights. Some held umbrellas that did nothing against the wind. Others stood bareheaded in the rain, hands clasped, watching silently. No one spoke loudly. It felt wrong to break the fragile focus, holding the scene together. Bilal leaned closer to Sarah's ear. "Your arm's going numb," he said softly. "Switch if you need to." She shook her head. Switching now would mean letting go. Even for a second she didn't believe they had. Another surge slammed into the drain, harder than before. Water frothed and churned, spilling higher onto the street. The dog cried out sharply, panic flaring again as its body was pulled sideways. Sarah gritted her teeth and leaned back, muscles screaming in protest. Horace tightened the rope further, anchoring himself against the pole. "I can feel it too," he said, voice strained. "Something's shifting under there." The flashlight beam dipped again, catching a brief shape beneath the surface. Long, dark, unmoving. Then it was gone, swallowed by the rushing water. A murmur rippled through the onlookers. "That wasn't just debris," someone whispered. Cameron raised a hand, silencing the crowd. "Stay back," he said firmly. "Everyone." The dog's breathing hitched, then steadied, shallow and fast. Its eyes fluttered, struggling to stay open. Sarah felt a surge of fear cut through her exhaustion. She leaned closer, rain stinging her face. "Look at me," she said urgently. "Stay with me. We're not done yet." The dog's eyes opened again, meeting hers. A soft sound escaped its throat. Not a cry this time, but something quieter, almost questioning. The kind of sound that asked if the pain is going to end. Sarah swallowed hard. The radio crackled again, louder now, overlapping voices breaking through the static. A warning came through. Water pressure building in the system. Possible release from upstream to prevent overflow elsewhere. It was a necessary measure. It was also a nightmare for anyone standing over an unstable drain. Cameron turned away slightly, listening, his jaw tightening. When he looked back, his expression had changed. "We may get a surge," he said. "A big one." No one asked when. They all knew it could be any second. The woman on the steps clutched her blanket tighter, tears mixing with rain. "Please," she whispered again. "Please." Sarah felt the rope tug as Horace shifted his stance. The current changed, swirling faster, pulling harder toward the drain. The sound beneath the water deepened, a low rumble that vibrated through the street. The drain groaned again, louder this time, concrete straining under forces it was never meant to hold. The dog let out another cry, raw and hoarse, its body tensing in Sarah's hands. She felt its heart racing, felt the fear surge back like a wave. "It's coming," Bilal said, eyes wide. I can feel it. Sarah could too. The water pressed harder against her legs, against her chest. Her boot slid another inch. She leaned back as far as she could, without losing balance, the rope biting into her waist. Hold! Horace shouted. The surge hit without warning. Water slammed into the drain, into Sarah, into everything. The current roared, louder than thunder, ripping past with terrifying force. The dog was yanked sharply downward, its body slipping in her grip. Sarah cried out, tightening her hold with everything she had left. I've got you, she screamed, though she wasn't sure it was true. The crowd gasped as water splashed high into the air. The flashlight beam flickered wildly, then steadied just enough to show the drain shifting, cracks spreading along its edge. Cameron lunged forward, bracing the pole as the rope went taut. For a split second, Sarah felt the dog slipping free. Its fur slid through her fingers, her numb hand failing her. Panic surged through her chest, hot and blinding. No, she whispered. No, no. Then she felt again, that unmistakable tug from below. Stronger this time. Not random. Not water. Something pulled, and the dog cried out in response, a sound filled with pure terror. Sarah's heart slammed against her ribs as she realized the pull wasn't just dragging the dog. It was dragging her too. Sarah, Bilal shouted as her footing slipped. She dug her heel into the curb, muscles tearing as she fought to stay upright. The rope strained, the pole rattled. The drain groaned like it was about to give way entirely. Rain blurred her vision, tears mixing with it as she clung to the dog with everything she had left. The storm raged. The water surged. The unseen force below pulled again, harder than ever. And in that moment, balance between rescue and disaster, trust and fear, holding on and being pulled under. Everything hung by a single breath, a single grip, a single choice that had yet to be made. Sarah's heel slipped off the curb, just for a heartbeat, but it was enough to send a shock of fear through everyone. The rope snapped tight around her waist, stopping her from being pulled closer to the drain, yet the force from below didn't ease. It felt like the water itself had decided to fight back. The dog cried out again, its body twisting in her grip, and for the first time, Sarah felt something wrap briefly around her wrist before vanishing beneath the surface. She froze. That wasn't debris, she said, her voice shaking despite her effort to stay calm. Horace's eyes widened as he leaned closer, careful not to disturb the unstable ground. I saw it move, he said. It's not stuck. It's shifting. Another rumble rolled to the drain, deeper and more violent than before. Cracks widened along the concrete edge, thin lines spreading like veins. Water rushed faster now, dragging leaves, trash, and pieces of broken pavement toward the opening. The street itself seemed to be giving up. Cameron turned sharply toward the crowd. Everyone back. Now! His voice carried authority born from years of crisis. This area isn't safe. Some people stepped away, fear finally overpowering curiosity. Others remained frozen, unable to look away. The woman on the steps covered her mouth, her eyes locked on the dog, as if leaving would somehow betray it. Sarah's arm screamed with pain, the cold now replaced by a deep burning ache. The dog's breathing grew shallow, uneven, its head pressed weakly against her forearm, as if it was trying to climb up her arm rather than fight the pull below. That small gesture broke something inside her. You're not alone, she whispered. I won't leave you. Then the water surged again, not harder, but smarter. It shifted direction, curling around the drain, opening in a way that pulled from the side instead of straight down. The dog was dragged sideways, scraping painfully against the concrete. Sarah adjusted instinctively, but the movement cost her precious balance. Bilal grabbed her jacket with both hands. I've got you, he said, his voice tight with effort. Just don't let go. Horace shone his flashlight deeper, angling it low. For a split second, the beam caught something that made his breath hitch. Not an object, not metal, but a shape tangled among debris. A second body. There's another one, he said, barely above a whisper. The words landed hard. Sarah's heart dropped. The thought hit her all at once, heavy and terrible. Another dog. Or worse. The reason this one hadn't been able to escape. Before anyone could respond, the dog in Sarah's grip cried out again, louder than before, a sound filled with panic and urgency. It twisted its head back toward the darkness, struggling not just against the water, but toward it. "It's trying to go back," Bilal said, stunned. "Why would it?" The answer came as another surge rolled to the drain, lifting debris just enough to reveal what the dog had been protecting. A smaller shape, barely visible beneath the water, wedged deeper inside the tunnel. Too still, too quiet. "Oh no," Sarah whispered. Everything shifted in that moment. The rescue wasn't just about one life anymore. The dog's behavior suddenly made sense. The refusal to let go, the way it stayed near the drain instead of fighting to escape earlier, the cries that sounded less like fear and more like warning. It hadn't been calling for itself alone. Horace swallowed hard. If we pull this one out hard, the other one might be swept away. The water roared, as if confirming his fear. Cameron ran a hand over his face, rain streaming down his fingers. "We don't have equipment for a two-body extraction in this current," he said, "and the structure's getting worse." Another crack split the concrete edge, a sharp, echoing sound that made everyone flinch. A section of the drain shifted slightly, sinking lower. The crowd gasped. Sarah felt the dog tense, its body vibrating with desperation. It tried again to twist free, not to escape her, but to move closer to the darkness where the smaller shape was trapped. Its eyes flicked back to Sarah, filled with panic and pleading. It wasn't asking to be saved. It was asking her to help the other one. The water surged higher, pressing against Sarah's chest now, the current threatening to knock her off balance again. Her arms shook violently, muscles reaching their limit. She could feel the rope cutting into her waist as Horace and Cameron braced harder. "We're running out of time," Bilal said, his voice breaking. "All of us." The drain groaned again, louder than ever, and something beneath the water shifted sharply, sending a powerful pull through the current. The smaller shape disappeared from view, dragged deeper into darkness. The dog cried out in pure terror, a sound that sliced through the storm and froze everyone in place. Sarah closed her eyes for a split second, breath shaking, heart pounding. Two lives, one grip, a collapsing street, rising floodwater, and no clear path forward. The storm had turned a rescue into a choice no one was ready to make, and the next few seconds would decide everything. The moment stretched thin, trembling under the weight of what had just been revealed. Sarah opened her eyes and looked down into the darkness again, rain stinging her face. The dog in her grip cried out once more, weaker now, its body shaking with fear and determination. It pulled again toward the drain, not hard, not wild, just enough to tell her everything she needed to know. "He won't leave it," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Even if we pull him free." Horace nodded slowly, understanding settling in. "Then we don't pull him free first." Cameron hesitated, the risk clear in his eyes. "If the drain collapses—" "I know," Sarah said, "but listen to him. He's been holding on all this time. He knows something we don't." Another surge rolled through, and this time the water briefly lifted enough of a flashlight to catch the smaller shape again. It moved, just barely. A tiny paw twitched, then disappeared under the rushing water. "He's alive," Bilal said, hope breaking through his fear. "The other one's alive." That was all it took. Cameron gave a sharp nod. "We do this together. Slow, controlled." He turned to the team. "No sudden pulls. We guide, not drag." Horace adjusted the rope, loosening it just enough to allow Sarah a few inches of movement without risking being pulled in. Bilal shifted his grip, bracing harder. The street shook again, concrete groaning, but it held. Sarah leaned forward carefully, lowering her arm deeper into the drain despite the cold and pain screaming through her body. The water pushed back instantly, fighting her, but she ignored it. Her free hand reached blindly into the darkness, fingers scraping against slick concrete, mud, debris. "Easy," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. The dog felt it too. It stopped struggling and leaned into her arm, its body pressing closer to the edge of the drain, guiding her movement. Its breathing was shallow but steady now, as if it knew this was a moment everything depended on. Her fingers brushed something soft, smaller, shaking. "I've got you," she said softly, heart pounding. The water surged again, but this time the team was ready. Horace and Cameron tightened the rope just enough to steady her. Bilal locked his stance. Sarah curled her fingers gently around the smaller body, cradling it against her arm. The larger dog cried out, not in panic this time, but urgency, as if telling her not to stop. Together, inch by inch, they lifted. The current fought them fiercely, roaring through the drain, pulling at both bodies like it didn't want to let go. Sarah felt her strength fading, her vision blurring at the edges. Her arms shook violently, but she didn't release her grip. She couldn't. "Now," Cameron said. "Slow. Don't rush." The drain cracked again, a sharp sound that made the crowd gasp. A chunk of concrete broke free and vanished into the water. The street shifted, but still, somehow, it held. With one final coordinated effort, Sarah leaned back as the rope took more of the weight. The water surged high, splashing over them, blinding for a moment, and then suddenly the pull eased. The larger dog came free first, sliding into Sarah's arms, collapsing against her chest, soaked and shaking but alive. Almost immediately, the smaller one followed, limp but breathing, cradled carefully against her forearm. The crowd erupted in gasps, sobs, and shouted prayers. The woman on the steps dropped to her knees, crying openly now. Even the storm seemed to pause for a breath. "They're out," Bilal said, his voice breaking. "They're both out." Sarah sank back onto the curb as the team pulled her clear of the water. Her arms trembled uncontrollably as she held the two dogs close, shielding them from the rain as best she could. The larger dog lifted its head weakly and nudged the smaller one, letting out a soft, broken whine. "It's okay," Sarah whispered, tears finally spilling. "You did it. You kept him safe." Cameron moved quickly, wrapping both dogs in dry blankets as another rescuer checked their breathing. The smaller one coughed weakly, then whimpered, a sound so small and fragile it silenced everyone around. Alive. Sirens grew louder in the distance as additional support finally arrived. The street was being closed off now, the danger acknowledged too late, but not too late for them. As the dogs were carefully carried toward the rescue vehicle, the larger one turned its head back toward the drain one last time. Its ears twitched, its body tense, as if listening. Then it barked once. Short, sharp. Everyone froze. The water in the drain shifted again, not violently this time, but steadily. The flashlight beam swept the opening, revealing something no one had noticed before. Wedged deeper inside, caught behind debris and shadow, was a third shape, smaller still, barely moving. Sarah's breath caught. "No," Bilal whispered. "There's another one." The storm chose that moment to roar again, water surging louder, stronger, as if warning them they had only seconds. The street trembled beneath their feet. Cameron swore under his breath, already signaling the team to move back. The dogs in the rescuer's arms whined urgently, struggling weakly, eyes fixed on the drain. Sarah stood despite her shaking legs, heart pounding all over again, exhausted, soaked, barely holding together. And yet, as she stepped back toward the edge, ignoring the shouts behind her, one thing was painfully clear. The rescue wasn't over. Not yet. Sarah didn't hesitate this time. Her body screamed for rest, her arms barely steady, but something deeper pushed her forward. The larger dog's bark still echoed in her ears, sharp and urgent, not fear but insistence. It wasn't done asking for help. None of them were. "Wait!" Cameron shouted as Sarah stepped closer to the drain again. She turned just enough to meet his eyes. "I know the risk," she said quietly, "but so does he." She nodded toward the soaked dog trembling in the blanket, eyes fixed on the darkness. He wouldn't bark like that for nothing. The storm gave them no pause. Water surged again, climbing fast. The street shuddered beneath their boots, a warning that time was nearly gone. Cameron swore under his breath, then waved the team forward. There was no perfect choice left, only the human one. 2 minutes, he said. That's all we have. Horace adjusted the rope again, hands moving fast but steady. Bilal took position at Sarah's side without a word, his face set with determination. The crowd held its breath, the rain falling harder now, as if trying to wash the moment away. The flashlight beam cut into the drain once more, revealing the small shape again, barely visible, wedged behind debris, trembling weakly. Smaller than the second. Younger. A puppy. Sarah felt her chest tighten. The pieces fell into place all at once. The older dog hadn't just been protecting one. It had been guarding its family, holding the line between the flood and the ones who couldn't fight it. That's why he stayed, Bilal whispered. That's why he never tried to run. Sarah lowered herself carefully, ignoring the protests of her muscles. The water was higher now, colder, more violent. She reached into the drain again, slower this time, careful not to disturb the fragile balance holding the concrete together. "I'm here," she murmured. "I won't rush you." The puppy barely moved, too exhausted to cry. Its tiny body shook with each breath. Sarah's fingers brushed its wet fur, and she felt how fragile it was, how easily the current could steal it away. Behind her, Cameron counted under his breath. The drain groaned again, louder this time. "Now," Horace said. "Sarah, now." She curled her hand gently around the puppy, shielding it with her arm. The moment she lifted, the water fought back, roaring through the drain, pulling hard as if refusing to let go of its last claim. The concrete cracked sharply, sending ripples of fear through everyone watching. Bilal tightened his grip on her jacket. "I've got you." Sarah leaned back with everything she had left. Pain flared white-hot, but she didn't release her hold. The rope went taut, Cameron bracing with all his weight. The puppy whimpered softly, a sound so small it nearly disappeared beneath the storm. And then, just like before, the pull eased. Sarah stumbled backward as the team hauled her clear. The puppy came free in her arms, soaked, shaking but alive. The drain collapsed inward a second later with a deep, hollow roar, water swallowing the opening completely. The crowd cried out as the street gave way, but everyone was already clear. The storm surged through the broken concrete, claiming the space they had just stood on. Sarah dropped to her knees, clutching the puppy to her chest, rain pouring down her face. Her body shook, exhaustion finally taking its toll. She looked up just in time to see the larger dog struggle to its feet, despite the blanket, pulling weakly toward her. She brought the puppy closer, and the dog let out a soft, broken sound. Relief, recognition, love all tangled together. The second dog stirred too, nudging closer. The three pressing together as if the storm no longer existed. "They're all here," Sarah whispered. All three. Paramedics moved in quickly, checking the dogs, wrapping them tighter in dry blankets. The puppy coughed weakly, then let out a tiny cry that made several people in the crowd break down in tears. Life, fragile but stubborn, refused to be washed away. As the dogs were loaded into the rescue vehicle, the woman from the steps approached slowly, her hands shaking. I think they're mine," she said softly. "They disappeared this afternoon when the water started rising. I searched everywhere." The larger dog lifted its head at the sound of her voice. Its tail moved weakly once, then again. Sarah smiled through tears. "They never stopped waiting for you." The woman collapsed to her knees, sobbing as she reached out, careful, gentle. The dogs responded immediately, pressing close despite their exhaustion, their bond unbroken. The storm slowly began to ease, rain thinning to a steady fall. The flooded street was quieter now, heavy with what almost been lost and would have been saved instead. Rescue lights reflected off the water as teams moved on to the next call, the next cry for help. Sarah sat on the curb, wrapped in a blanket someone had draped over her shoulders. Her hands still trembled, but her breathing finally slowed. Bilal sat beside her, silent, sharing the weight of the moment. "You okay?" he asked eventually. She nodded. "I will be." Cameron joined them. Exhaustion etched deep into his face. "You made the right call," he said simply. Sarah looked toward the rescue vehicle as it pulled away, carrying the dogs to safety. "They made it," she replied. "I just listened." As dawn began to creep into the storm-dark sky, The flooded streets looked different. Still broken. Still scarred. But quieter. The echoes of fear replaced by something else. Proof that compassion can cut through even the loudest chaos. The story would spread later. Videos shared. Headlines written. People would call a miracle, a dramatic flood rescue, a heroic moment. But for Sarah, it would always come back to one sound. A dog's cry in the rain. Refusing to be ignored. Refusing to let anyone forget that some lives depend entirely on whether someone chooses to stop and listen. And that night, someone did.